Thanks for tuning in to the HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda. The HR Uprising is focused on helping forward-thinking people professionals deliver real lasting value in their organisations. I'm a chartered psychologist, speaker and trainer, and recently authored the best-selling business book, How to Be a Change Superhero. My day job is founder and CEO of software and training business Actus. This gives me the opportunity to work with other businesses like yours. We are focused on building a better workplace for people wherever they are located, with the help of our performance, learning and talent management software and our training and consultancy services. Every week on the podcast, I will be covering different topics and challenges, joined by relevant experts and real-life people professionals. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy and get value from this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. And as we are moving into the month of romance, well, we're not talking about romance in the workplace, but certainly February, the topic today is about making the business case for leading with heart. So we felt it was topical, and I'm delighted to be talking to Roxanne Hobbs, who, if you'd like to just maybe introduce yourself and the Hobbs Consultancy, Roxanne.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Roxanne. I'm the founder of the Hobbs Consultancy, and we've been going for about 14 years now, working with leaders to help them to lead with heart, which in effect is creating inclusive and high-performing cultures.
And what brought you into sort of this thinking, really, in terms of it being more heart-focused as opposed to head-focused?
So we've been on a journey, as they like to say. So I used to work in the advertising industry, was a managing partner there, and I left when I was pregnant to really focus on supporting women in the workplace. I was one of the really early advocates of the women in leadership agenda. I was just setting up the Hobbs Consultancy about the time that Sheryl Sandberg was talking about lean in and so on. And I've kind of seen the pendulum swing one way for diversity, equity and inclusion, and obviously began to feel it swing back again. But the thing that's really stuck is around culture change and inclusion. And we'd been doing some repositioning work last year, and I was literally at a Christmas lunch with someone in my team, Ade, and I was talking about the repositioning, and he said to me, I just don't feel like your true purpose is in that at the moment. I feel like you're describing what you do really well, but where's you in it? Where's your essence? And just without even thinking, I said, well, I want people to lead with heart, but I can't possibly say that out loud in the workplace. And he said, why not? And I thought, oh, do you know what? I think there's some personal work to do on what my resistance and what my barriers are. So we went off and did a huge research project around it. We have written a white paper now, which I've provided a link to you for. And the more I dug into it, the more I saw it just as the answer to a lot of the issues that we're facing in the workplace at the moment.
So I suppose before we go into what you really mean by leading with heart, I do empathise with your point of kind of going, I'm being of the background, again, who was in HR 30 years or so, it wasn't cool to look fluffy, if you see what I mean. And I think that's where you said you were perhaps resistant to it, and that's understanding what we want to, is how can we disconnect leading with heart from being perceived as soft and fluffy?
Absolutely. We're operating in a market, aren't we, where heart is seen as soft. Perhaps it's just about being nice, but really this wasn't a manifesto about being nice and kind to each other. It was thinking, right, what is the model for effective leadership and sustainable leadership going forward? If you think about the workplace at the moment, people are burnt out, trust in leaders is declining, people are scared for their jobs, and really the result of that is a lot of fear, a lot of disengagement. And some leaders are using that just to double down and say, right, well, we need to just push people harder. We need to push people harder. But if you're using that fear to push people harder, there's only so far you can go with that before people will completely disengage and check out or actually become very, very ill. So it's about trying to offer a different solution And I think this is one of the most important things about it. We're talking about leading with heart, but that's not to say that we're not still asking people to hold each other accountable and to put boundaries in place and to really focus on performance. It's that there are very strong skills that you need alongside those for those things to be effective. I think we need to get in touch with our humanity, Lucinda, and we're not very good at being human at the moment because of the internet, I suppose, because of social media, because of screens, because of how busy we are. And I see this as us getting back in touch with what makes us human, because ultimately that's going to make us be the most creative, innovative, and connected with people in the workplace.
Yeah, do you know, it reminds me of Stephen Covey used to have a quote, which was, with people who can say that slow is fast and fast is slow, with people stuff. And that kind of resonates with what you're saying there, in that getting back in touch with it, we kind of, like you say, we're stuck on screens or tasks, or we're under such pressure, so we push harder. But does that actually get the results? I was thinking, my daughter's recently gone into the workplace, and she was recently complaining, it's in the sales role, was complaining about the motivational style of one of the leaders, who's basically try harder, push harder, get more, and it's sort of, and doesn't work. She doesn't find it motivational at all. So that sort of behaviour actually it was counterproductive for productivity in her perspective, which made me think of what you've been doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might work for a week if you've got a big pitch or something, but there's a very short shelf life for it. And really, you want to be in relation with people in the workplace for a lot longer than that, and in community, working together on a shared goal for much longer than that. Absolutely.
So your model is really sort of you saying that it's not about either or, heart or head. It's about pulling things together. It's about the and, which I really like that idea of it. These things can work together. So your performance and empathy or connection or whatever. Do you want to explain a little bit more about your model, the pillars model?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just take one step up from that to begin with. I think obviously it's a bit of an eye roll, but the world is becoming increasingly complex and ambiguous, and change is the new normal, and yada, yada, yada. And I work with leaders all the time who it is really hard for our brains and the way our brains are wired to hold that ambiguity and complexity. So part of this is about supporting leaders hold polarities, things that seem to be in opposition with each other. Fast and slow is a good example. People think you can go fast or you can go slow, but there's a polarity in there as well, that you can go fast and slow, which is hard for us as human beings to get our head around. So the kind of bigger picture here, it's supporting leaders to be able to sit with polarities and ambiguities, which is going to be increasingly needed as we move forward. And there's 3 pillars within that. So the connection pillar is about being able to hold empathy and accountability. And people tend to go to one or the other. The authenticity pillar is a bit about being vulnerable and by implementing boundaries. And then finally, the consciousness pillar, leading with self-awareness, self-reflection, and decisiveness. And we find for each one of those, people have their go-to that they prefer to be in. There's also your culturally ascribed preferences. I was running a workshop on this at a Reframe event in October, and I did the empathy and accountability, and I got people to go to the side of the room where they preferred to hang out. Everybody went to the empathy side. Nobody wanted to be seen on the accountability side, which I just found really amusing. But the strength lies in the and. So let me unpick that empathy and accountability one a bit more, because I think it brings it to life. So everyone rocked over to the empathy side of the room, and I was like, well, that's interesting. What happens in a workplace where we overplay the empathy side of things? And it was like, oh, okay, well, we get emotionally burnt out ourselves. We start taking on other people's work. We forgive too much. And then we started discussing what are the warning signs. What was interesting, resentment was one of the key warning signs that you were overplaying this strength a bit too much. And then I got everyone to switch to the other side of the room. What would it be like in accountability? And literally the moving of people, it was like, oh, this is interesting. This feels new. This feels like a different space for me. And then I literally got people to almost straddle the two of them. And you could just see the light bulbs go off. So, oh, actually, if I'm to do both of these things together, I'm going to be empathetic. Like, yes, you might have struggles going on outside of work. You might be having a difficult week. Absolutely. And we've got a deadline to hit on Friday because we're a business and we have a profit number that we need to hit by the end of the year. And how do I hold both of those things so that we can drive the business forward? I'm going to be empathetic first. I'm going to lead with empathy, and I'm going to be accountable and hold you accountable. And
that's interesting, because sometimes it's a dichotomy. And let's say people go to the empathy side, and then they feel almost like they've become too kind, or they've become a pushover, or that people take advantage of them and feel they don't have to take accountability, because that's where you're talking fluffy, isn't it? But actually, that sort of tough love, that is, it's really tough. I know this is really tough. We're all finding this really hard. However, we are where we are. How are we going to do it? It's a bit like using coaching, isn't it? How do we still keep coach people to still take responsibility while appreciating it's not easy, but doesn't mean they don't have to do it at all. Yeah.
And we found that if people were kind of overplaying empathy, that's when they would suddenly swing into accountability, but do it in a really unskilled, reactionary way. So then, of course, it came across as being too hard or too harsh, because they weren't doing it in a particularly skilled way. And I love that you've connected it with coaching, because I was sat with all of my team talking about this.
I feel that is a good coaching start. So as opposed to being direct, so directive people is you kind of it's accountability compliance. Whereas if you're coaching and you're listening to the person, helping them find the answers and how are they going, you still hold them accountable, but you help them to decide how to. So it feels more collaborative.
I think coaching naturally holds the space for all of these three polarities. I think that's a really great thought.
So interesting. And so I like that polarities. I like also the concept, I guess, for listeners here, if they were discussing this with the team, the way you, I'm visualising you using you're sort of physically getting people to move around, which I think is a great way of just holding yourself and going, oh, what would it be like to actually think about things differently? Quite a nice way of using this as an activity that could get you to have a discussion with your leaders really about this.
Yeah, absolutely. We find moving the body really helps. And we have also found what helps is almost to see it as a lens that you can look at some people issues through. So we looked at, I'll tell you what, it was a really difficult topic. Do you remember the march in London, the people that were putting the flags up, and there was that difficult march and lots of people were scared about going into work. And we said, okay, so what would empathy and accountability look like in this space? What would authenticity and boundaries look like? So it's like, it's okay to have your opinions and have your point of view. It's not okay to say anything that will intentionally hurt people in this workplace. And so for every organization, they were working out, right, where are our boundaries in here? How can we hold the space for people to be vulnerable, to share what's meaningful to them? And at the same time, we need to be really clear about what's okay and what's not okay within this organization when there's this stuff, let me just call it that, happening on the streets at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So interestingly, as we're describing it like this and we're talking about this, I can see that this is far from fluffy, and actually it's harder than being tough, because you are you're sort of balancing the tightrope, you're doing both. And so I can imagine that that's really quite powerful for things, and has some really good knock-ons in terms of organisations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it encourages some really tough choices once you consider it. And it encourages a systems view on things as well. So we're not just talking about people as individuals, we're seeing what systems need too, which ultimately, I might go down another rabbit hole there, but is another skill that I think leaders need going forward, that systemic awareness. And I think that's where the real work of leadership lives, in that and space, to say, right, I can be empathetic and I can hold people accountable. And if I can do both of those things, actually, I create trust, I create direction, I create a space where people can perform. And I think that's where the work of leadership is.
So one of the things when we were talking separately, so it's great in terms of the workplace, you had some examples, I think, sort of in sport, didn't you, as well, where this has sort of come through and I suppose reinforces your points here.
Yes. So I love talking about sport as examples, because I guess their results are so immediate, aren't they? So I was a huge fan of Jurgen Klopp when he was at Liverpool. I just really loved what he did around community and loving the community and the difference that made to the people on the pitch. And you would never say that those were particularly kind of soft skills. Gareth Southgate is a great example. I was really lucky to go and see him speak a few weeks ago at the Barbican. I went with my husband for his birthday, and it was like part birthday present, part CPD.
I love it.
But he was amazing at creating a sense of belonging, creating a sense of psychological safety in a very masculine, macho culture. And really working out it was the team's relationship with winning that needed to shift. And the way he stood alongside people like Rashford and Sancho and Saka following those missed penalties, and when he took responsibility as a leader for them, I just feel like he was really great at holding the balance between those two sides, like holding people accountable and creating belonging, making tough calls, being clear, and also being empathetic. And the two sides, I suppose, coexisting really beautifully within him. He just seemed like a really nice, down-to-earth bloke as well. I appreciate Gareth Southgate a lot.
It's interesting because, I wonder what, I haven't read, I'm sure he's got an autobiography, I haven't read it. But of course, he would have that empathy because he was absolutely castigated, wasn't he, for missing the penalty. And 30 years, it was something like the Euros in the 90s, wasn't it? So he would have had a real negative experience, which I imagine has helped him to bring empathy to how not to, to damage people. Interestingly, I don't know, did he talk about his personal playing experience?
He did, absolutely. And I mean, the story I make up, and I don't know enough about him, and he was obviously a little bit reluctant to talk about it because all he ever gets asked about is missing that penalty. And I think
really, yeah.
And it was like, how much has he achieved since? And he's still remembered as that guy.
Move on.
But the story I kind of made up from what he did say was he had to do an incredible amount of personal work on himself to stop that being the defining moment in his story. Never mind what other people are saying about him. He couldn't let that be the defining moment in his story. And he had to move through that to be able to interact authentically with the rest of the England team and for them to create their own story. And I think it shows just how difficult, I mean, we're not all managing England, obviously, but I think any leadership position requires so much emotionally of you. And we've all got stories, we've all got stuff that's happened in our past that if we don't work through them, can come to dominate and come to be the story itself. So we talk about the things that get in the way of leading with heart, and leading with fear is one of them. So if you're scared about losing your job, you are going to lead from that place of fear, and that is going to have a huge impact on the team around you because they'll pick up on it. Leading without reflection. So if you're busy, and you're not stopping to think, oh, that happened, I reacted strangely to that, what was going on there, and really digging into that. Leading with disconnection. Leading from hurt is when difficult things have happened to us. And you know what, I did this earlier on in my career, because when I left the media agency that I was working in, and I don't talk about this too often, but I think enough water's passed under the bridge now, enough people have left that agency for it to be okay. But there wasn't great behavior when I was pregnant and on maternity leave, and I'm like, but at the beginning I was very much leading from a place of hurt around that. And you could tell in how I delivered my workshops, I was too attached to the outcome because of my hurt. I needed to fix it so that I could feel better. And you could almost see in Gareth Southgate's trajectory, that could have ended up happening to him. So I think there's an enormous amount of personal work that is needed so that people can lead with heart, because it's so easy to fall into those traps otherwise.
So that links to your reflection point as well, doesn't it? So being able to be self-aware. I think it also, we talked about coaching earlier, I feel like emotional intelligence is a key thing. So having that self-awareness to be able to think about what might stop us and what might enable us to do this. Yeah,
absolutely. And I don't think we have all got the skills to be able to do that on our own. I personally think working with a coach, your leaders are working in very pressurized, intense environments that just having a coach almost forces you to create that bit of space in your week, doesn't it? Where you can go, oh, this is what's happening, and really make sense of it. So yeah, I would be a huge advocate for coaching for leaders as well.
So I suppose if we were looking at this in terms of takeaways, so that could be one of the takeaways for HR professionals. It could well be, looking for coaching, or even if it's not external coaches, supporting people with some sort of internal buddying or coaching to think about embracing ambiguity and holding these things. What other things would you recommend?
I think positioning it as something that is time neutral. Yes, it's hard, and yes, you will have to do the personal work. So I'm not discrediting the amount of prep that might be needed, but it's not like we're creating a new initiative in the building or something that's going to take time. It's the how you do the work, not the this is an extra project for you to work on. I think anchoring it in business outcomes is really important. What are the business outcomes you're trying to achieve at the moment, and how are your people intricately linked to those business outcomes, so that if you can link all of that together with your how in your leadership, I think that helps to keep it on the table. I've already talked about systems. I think we need to think systemically. A lot of the time we think more about symptoms, and I need to solve this problem, I need to solve this problem, and we're addressing the cultural issues, but in doing so, we are ignoring the cracks that sit underneath that in the first place, the stress, the disengagement. So thinking at systems level, I think helps as well. I also think the word sustainability is helpful, because who doesn't want sustainability? If we want to sustain our people and their performance over time, being on one side or the other of these polarities is not going to cut it. You're not going to have sustainability. Any system which, I guess, ping pongs between the two extremes will have a lot of stress within that system. The healthy straddling of the and is what allows a system to thrive and for people to perform really well. So I guess they're practical takeaways, but I guess they're ways to frame it in your mind so that you remind yourself of the importance and don't think, oh, this is just another thing on my to-do list that I need to do.
Yeah, and again, I really like that idea. It's not something extra. It's not something that costs money, but it's how can people, really just consider it. And what I'm wondering is this a coming together of things that have happened in the past? Is it one style of leadership, then it oscillated to another style of leadership, and then this is embracing both? So is it more challenging for leaders to learn to do both? I think it possibly is, because we all have, like your example earlier, we all have a natural strength. So it's about being able to balance, but it's not necessarily about watering them down. It's about being able to maybe move to both sides of it's having more flexibility, maybe interpersonal flexibility.
Yeah, it's about agility and flexibility. And you're right. I think people assume you can either be head or you can be heart. But really, in terms of how humans work, our head and our heart, they're in cahoots with each other anyway. They're working together. Or you can be an empathetic leader, or you can be a results-driven leader. And I just don't think the two are mutually exclusive. And I think it perhaps is the way our brains are wired, that we have this tendency to put things in separate boxes. I just think the power is in the bringing them together. The hard work is in the bringing them together as well.
And I suppose just finally, if there's someone out there thinking actually they want to present this to their leadership team and convince this very logical data-driven leadership team that this is worth actually trying to think differently and to do both is worthwhile, what ideas have you got that you can help people be convinced?
Well, read the white paper. That's a good place to start. So I'll provide the link to that. I think put any people business issue that you've got at the moment through that lens and have a conversation about it. So we've got a lunch this week where everyone's bringing along a people issue. And for each course, we are doing one of the pillars. So over starters, we'll be doing pillar 1, which is the empathy and accountability one. So people bring their people issue and we talk about what these sides would look like and then what the and would look like. And then our main course do the second one, and over our pudding we do the third one. And it's just a fun way to bring it to life that anybody could organise within their workplace. Or if you're sat around a table trying to solve a people issue, just go, hold on a minute, why are we looking at the or here? What would the and look like? That'd be another way to bring it to life.
Love it. Thank you so much, Roxanne, I think for taking us through this. So you've mentioned that you're going to share the link, which we'll put in the show notes. But if people want to get in touch with you, how can they best do that?
You can drop me an email, Roxanne@thehobbsconsultancy.com. I'm on LinkedIn. We're doing coach training in Tangier in April. So that's a really fun way to come and hang out with me in Morocco. Just find me in the usual places. I'm really happy to talk more about the topic.
We'll put those contact notes there as well. Lovely. Roxanne, thank you so much for joining me on this Leading with Heart in February. February month of Leading with Heart, and hopefully we've inspired a few people out there to really give this some thought and to give it a go.
Great. Thanks so much, Lucinda. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
I really hope you found this week's episode useful and enjoyable. If you did, perhaps you could recommend us to a friend or colleague, or give us a review on your platform of choice. It really helps new listeners to find us. Now you can access links to any of the information mentioned in this show via the website www.hruprising.com. Further free resources are also available at www.actus.co.uk. There you can also find out more about our software and training solutions. Finally, why not join our LinkedIn group, the HR Uprising, to share ideas and collaborate with other like-minded people professionals. Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast.
This episode was brought to you by Disruptive Media, helping bold entrepreneurs stand out through podcasting, video, and social content. Visit disruptivemedia.co.uk to learn more.